Segment 3, Gold and Black Live with Mike Steele. And Mike has been a frequent guest on the show. Not frequent, but at least a couple times a year. And he is really one of my favorite analysts of Purdue basketball, not only because he knows basketball, but he also played at Purdue on Purdue's NIT championship team. And your last year of eligibility was 76, right?
Yeah.
Yep, I think that's right. And obviously, it's coached at East Carolina, at Butler, at the head coach at DePaul as well, and was behind, or at least seated in the stand, not too far behind the Purdue bench in Milwaukee. And he'll be making his way to Philadelphia for Purdue's game tomorrow night, or excuse me, tonight, actually, as we record this, against St. Peter. So, Mike, this is Purdue's got a lot of opportunity in front of it, and on paper, you're a double-digit favorite over St. Peter's, but that can be fraught with peril. You've had a chance to at least look at Purdue up close and personal a lot this year, but last week in Milwaukee, but also St. Peter's is going to be a team that appears to be formidable, something that Purdue will have to keep its head screwed on in tonight's game.
Did you just say fraught with peril?
I did.
Wow.
That's F-R-A-U-G-H-T.
No, I know. I just, yeah. Okay. Does that mean like they could beat us?
A lot of treachery there.
No, so what you're saying, like in regular languages, can they beat us? And yes, yeah, they can.
Okay.
Yeah. It's fraught with peril.
Why do you think that's so?
Well, it's real simple. Like if we were playing Kentucky, we wouldn't be having this conversation because Kentucky could beat us. And if we were playing Murray State, if they would have won that game, they would be 32-2 and have won 27 games in a row. And you would say, we know Murray State can beat us. So they beat both of those teams. And the one that I watched the Kentucky game, and they were in control. I mean, but when they beat Kentucky, the normal thought is, well, they're going to get blown out in the next game. Yeah. And they were a 10-point underdog against Murray State, and they never trailed the whole game. If you watch, you would have said, well, St. Peter's should have been a 10-point favorite in that game.
Yeah. So
when you sent me the information and I looked at it, I watched it, it was pretty interesting. They run about as many sets or more so than Purdue does. And Purdue runs, wow. I told Matt I'd had to be there 3 years to learn all the friggin' offenses and stuff that he has. But they run a lot of screen for the screeners. They run a lot of double screens for their shooters. I mean, when you see their guys come off those screens, it's just exactly like watching our guys come off the screens. And they're tough. They guard, they out hustle Kentucky, and they've got a bunch of fifth-year seniors. It reminds me of Wichita State a few years ago, Loyola Chicago a few years ago, where they're good enough they could go to the Final Four.
Yeah. That whole thing about fifth and sixth years and somebody, in COVID has caused some of that, but that experience is hard to. Purdue's got some guys that are older, but then again, you got some guys that are really young that you're expecting, to play well. The Caleb First of the world, and even Zach Edey to some extent, though their experience. How big a difference from a coaching standpoint is to have guys that have been around that are fifth-year seniors, or that has got to be a huge thing for not only St. Peter's but any team that steps on the court.
No, it is, and like. You look at Duke, and Duke's got 3 freshmen, but they're NBA first-round draft choices. They got 2 guys that have played that are first-round NBA draft choices. So I think if you look at Auburn last week, they've got a guy that's probably going to be the first player picked in the draft. And if you just watch that one game, you'd say, my gosh, he is so far over his head in this game. And when Duke lost to Carolina in Coach K's last home game, those freshman kids, they look up in the stands and they see 120 Duke guys that they used to watch play when they were kids, and they just couldn't handle all that pressure. So, there's no question when you look at, well, like when Carolina won it, Carolina a few years ago, they didn't have anybody that went to the NBA, but they had 3-year starters, 4-year starters. Villanova's done it. One of the things that's kept Kentucky from winning again, I think, is that they don't have those senior guards that, are used to being in pressure situations. So I think you got to have a combination of both. And I think Purdue has that combination of some really talented guys, but also some guys that, have been in those big games.
From a coaching standpoint, getting guys to contribute at the right time. Caleb First hits a huge three, gets a couple big plays inside. Ethan Morton was terrific defensively, hits a couple big threes. It seems to me the NCAA tournament is about that. Guys that come out and it's just about making something happen. We see how Jaden Ivey obviously play extremely well, especially in the second game against Texas. What as a coach, Purdue's got a bench that's big enough that you can there's an array of guys that you might step up that you might not expect. Is that how you look at it as well?
Yeah, I think Caleb, I think people forget, I had a chance to talk with him when I was in Lafayette to see one of the games, and he got COVID, and he came back and he said he felt okay, but he never felt like he had the energy that he had before he got COVID. And, when I watched him play, we were in Connecticut and watched us play those 2 games, Villanova and Carolina. And I walked away there saying, there's a kid that will start for Purdue for 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and then he just, and I think a big part of that was the COVID. He just never played like he had any energy. And it was really good to see him get back in, back into the rotation and hit a big shot. And Morton, every game, Morton's bigger than I thought he was. And Morton
6'6"
can get out and guard those guards, and they got to shoot over him, but he's also big enough he can fight guys inside. I think that those 2 guys, when they're playing well, it gives coach a lot of options.
Yeah. St. Peter's, you would think, who knows how they're going to come and defend Purdue? Will they play it like do you think that the key is, not doubling down on Travion Williams or Zach Edey inside? What do you expect in tonight's game as you look at St. Peter's and what they might try to do? Because it's a huge size differential. Obviously, and we've talked about that, but is that a ticket to, are you going to make Travion Williams beat you to play 3 for 2, or how do you look at that?
Well, they out-rebounded Kentucky and they out-rebounded Murray, even though they're not very big, but they're tough. And I've always said that I'd rather have a 6'5" guy that's tough, especially on the defensive end, than a 6'10" guy that can block some shots, but he can't get those tough rebounds. And so, I think they'll try both ways. I think Texas tried both ways. Texas, it's funny how fans all over, are the same. Fans, I'm sitting there in the stands, and, when we leave, the Texas fans think they got bad officiating. The Purdue fans think we got bad officiating. And I'm in the car, and Bruce White was with me. He was driving, and I said, well, how many free throws do you think we shot? He said, I don't know, 20, 25. I said, how about Texas? He goes, about the same. I said, how about 46 to 12? 46 free throws. I thought he was going to wreck the car. He goes, that can't be right. I go, well, then they got the box score. It was good for us in that game. And that what the Texas go, what Beard does is what Bobby Knight used to do. They just start off grabbing and holding and pushing and shoving, and they get some calls, but officials don't want to just keep calling it and calling it and calling it. And these officials, and I think Matt did a nice job with them in that, gracefully pointing out, like, they're holding our big guys by the shoulders. We can't get a shot off. And, you know, this year, some teams that have had some luck in that Wisconsin played behind our guys. And I think what they thought is we're not going to give up a dunk. We're just going to, when the shot goes up, that guy's just going to block that guy out. And we're going to make them push them off the block and make some 7 and 8 foot shots rather than 2 foot shots. And it worked. So it'll just be a question. If they can't get us off the block, then they're going to have to double down. And if they double down, I thought that Ivy did a nice job of distributing the ball. He led to some 3-point shots because everybody's trying to stop him. And I thought he was really in the second half. And if you notice the first half, they face guarded him. It wasn't a boxing one. It was a one face guard. You don't help. You don't rebound. You don't do anything. And he was 2 inches from Ivy's face the whole time. I mean, the first time somebody did that to me in high school, I wanted to call timeout and go talk to my mom and say, Mom, this isn't fair. They can't do this. But then what Matt did, which was really smart, instead of Ivy couldn't get open on the wings because the guys were guarding so tight, then Matt got the ball to him and let him bring it up the floor. And the whole second half, he played pretty much the point, and that opened everything up because they couldn't keep him from getting it. And he'd come off those screens and he would, bust off and get guys shots. And so I got to give the coaches a lot of credit there because they had Ivy bottled up in that first half.
Tonight's second game will be interesting, obviously, and hopefully from a Purdue perspective, as you can sit back and watch it knowing you're playing on Sunday. UCLA and North Carolina. You saw North Carolina up at the Mohegan Sun. It's a very different team right now, it appears. Obviously a season's worth of growth. I don't know how much you've seen UCLA, but how do you see that matchup and how good is Carolina? Are they leaps and bounds better than they were back in November? How do you look at those teams?
Well, 3 weeks ago, I watched Carolina get beat by Texas. Well, first they got beat by Pittsburgh at home. Yeah. And Pittsburgh's won maybe 5 games. Yeah. And then they got beat by Virginia Tech by 30. This is a month ago. This isn't November. This is a month ago. And I just thought they were horrible. And then when they went in and beat Duke at Duke in Coach K's farewell deal, I think it just was a huge shot of adrenaline for them and confidence. And, they're playing, I mean, they had Auburn down 25 with 9 minutes to go. And if they didn't kind of implode there, that could have been a 25 point win. Baylor against Baylor. Yeah. So I don't know. Their guards are, if their guards are on, I mean, their guards are going to shoot it whenever they can. And if they're not making them, they're still going to shoot it. And that's what happened in those games they got beat. Their guards didn't make shots and, they just weren't very good, but they're making some shots now. And so, and UCLA, Mick Cronin is really a good coach, and his teams guard and they're unselfish. He's had some injuries. I don't think they're as good as they've been, but I think the 2 best games this weekend are going to be Texas Tech against Duke, and then UCLA against Carolina, because Carolina is really playing on a high note, but UCLA can defend and they can take those guards out of their game. And Texas Tech is like Texas. I mean, they will be attacking Duke, and Duke plays 6 guys and really only 5, but those 5 they play are all first round draft choices. So it's like playing an NBA team for those 5 guys. But I think those 2 games will have the potential to be the best games.
Yeah. When you look at Purdue and the play of Eric Hunter Jr. in the backcourt, we've talked a lot about this year, just about being good enough in at that position. And Hunter obviously, I think he only was 1 for 7 from the floor, but hit a big shot. did a good job defensively. Not had some problems with Carr just from a physical standpoint, but it's always about guards in the NCAA tournament. And I guess you got to put Jaden Ivey in that category. Purdue's guards are good enough to get Purdue to the Final Four in your view?
Oh yeah, I mean, especially the way Hunter's playing and the way he's played for the last, I think since we got beat by Wisconsin. I know he went in and talked to the coaches and said, when I'm in the game, he wasn't pressing to get more time. When I get in the game, I want to guard their best player. I want to guard their best offensive player. And I think that when he's focusing on that, then he's been able to make shots. He's been able to make plays. I think sometimes when you worry about your shooting, then you don't do all the other stuff. I think right now Sasha is kind of in that situation where he's not making his shots, and consequently, the last game he got 5 rebounds and he guarded. And if you're not making your shots, you got to be able to do some other things. And Sasha's got to do that, and Gillis has to do that. I mean, but I think the way Hunter's been playing, our guards are good enough.
Yeah. It's been interesting because Sasha's struggled. Actually, Gillis has not shot it as well of late as well, but he finds other ways to contribute. Though I mean, he is still a heat-seeking missile when he does those dives for offensive rebounds. It just gets you that extra possession that you need. So, all right.
Oh no, he's tough. I like him. I like him.
Oh yeah, no doubt. So, give me the crystal ball, Coach. They gonna make it or not?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, obviously I hope they are as a fan, but I think we can beat. I mean, unfortunately this year you really can't look at any games and say, well they're going to win that game. You used to, I mean, even like Gonzaga's barely won their games. I mean, Arizona's barely won their games. I don't think there's hardly any difference between the teams that are left. And I think Purdue, it's such a long season. And, again, I've got a lot of friends of mine that are Purdue fans. They're like, what's wrong with Purdue? I said, well, they've won 29 games. There's not too much wrong with them. But everybody wants to win all the games. And I think that they got their mojo back right now. When I saw them in Milwaukee, they got some pop to them. I mean, you literally can tell when guys are even getting on the bus, or they got a little swagger to them right now. So I'm excited about seeing them this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be great experience in Philadelphia, and with the Final Four on the line. But like you said, one game at a time. You got to win. You got to win Friday. You got to win tonight against a team at St. Peter's. It's got some magic in them, and that's going to be a challenge. So,
well,
Mike, thanks so much. Yeah, go ahead. I'll finish up.
No, you know what? The challenge I think with St. Peter's is that the only people in the building that will be rooting for the Boilers will have Boilermaker on their shirt or hat, because they are the true Cinderella of this tournament. And and I think one of the things too that'll be interesting is I think their coach, who I really like, I like his personality, his guys just love him, but I don't think there's any question he's going to be the next coach at Seton Hall.
Yeah.
And so that can affect players one of two ways. They can either say, hey, he's our coach now, let's keep it up, keep this on a roll. Or they've had a week to think, he's leaving. Am I going to stay? Do I want, who's going to be the next coach? You got lots of questions that can come up in a week of knowing that everybody is saying that this is, he's going to be gone. So we'll see.
Yep, going to be interesting. All right, thanks so much, Mike. Have safe travels, and hope you have a long weekend in Philadelphia.
No, I do too. And if we win and go to the Final Four, not that I'm superstitious, but we have to do this again. And I don't care if you even tape it. We'll just have to act like we're doing it.
All right, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll get you down there. We'll get you down at the French Quarter, I promise. So that'll be perfect. All right, man. Thanks so much. We want to thank our sponsors, Triple X and Hilton Garden Inn, of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson, the good folks at WLFI, Gordon Jackson and company for making this happen. Our guest, Mike Steele, Rob Hummel, Brian Newbert. We appreciate them as well. Another fun show. And yeah, we're hoping to do a show next week in New Orleans as the Boilermakers hopefully prepare for the Final Four. Okay. Have a great one, Mike. Thanks again. And
all right,
for all of you, look forward to seeing you next week.